Chief Judge Cook is in the audience.
Oh, where is the chief?
Right there.
Well, he ought to come up here, I'm thinking. Let me get the chief up here. Do you have another chair up here? We need one more. Where's the chief? And Judge Jones, huh? We need one more chair. Geez, all we need is three more.
This is great.
Chief, thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for coming. Let me, in addition to Chief Judge Wackler and Judge Alexander, we have some very special guests that I'd like to acknowledge. The Chief Judge, former Chief Judge Lawrence Cook, and Judge Jones, of course, are up here. And then we have some members of the family. Judge Wackler, we have his wife Joan, his daughter Lauren Wackler Montclair, her husband Paul Montclair, his daughter Allison Wackler, his son Philip Wackler, his mother-in-law Elsie Shapiro. That's the Elsie Shapiro. Secretary Dorothy Young, and a friend, Joseph Bellacosa. Now, Judge Alexander has an even more interesting list. Listen to these names. He has his brother, Louis Zanders. He has his nephew, Anthony Randolph. He has his law clerk, Leslie Leach. He has two friends, Jane Solomon and her mother, Mary Solomon, and then he has his secretary, whose name, believe it or not, for you LCA people, is Suzette Quarles, who is not related to Julian, about whom you've been writing. No, as I said in the statement that I believe you have, no governor in the history of this state has been afforded a greater opportunity and challenge to shape one of the state's most important institutions, the Court of Appeals. I've already exercised that responsibility by appointing two judges, Richard Simons and Judith Kay, who in my opinion have performed superbly. Now I appoint two more members of the court, one of them a chief judge, who will be called upon to lead this great court to new levels of adjudicative excellence, while at the same time helping to administer the state's entire court system. I've spent all the time given me by the process reviewing as thoroughly as possible all the materials that were afforded me. I've read the documentation provided by the Commission, representative opinions of the nominees, analyses of other opinions, various statements of recommendation. My counsel, Jerry Crotty, my special counsel, Fabian Palomino, and my Director of Criminal Justice, Larry Kurlander, have engaged in the same process. In addition, I received the views of many past and present members of the judiciary, including members of the Court of Appeals. I find that all of those recommended by the Commission are qualified to serve on our highest court, and that all of those who were nominated for chief are also qualified to serve in that capacity. I've chosen to appoint Sal Wackler as chief judge and Fritz Alexander as associate judge. Judge Wackler is uniquely well qualified in terms of character, temperament, professional aptitude, and experience to serve as chief. He's the only nominee who has the advantage of having served on the Court of Appeals. He served with distinction since 1973. Over the past 12 years, he's mastered the unique intricacies of the court's jurisdiction and developed a familiarity with and a respect for every part of this great state that's affected by our highest court's rulings. His more than 300 judicial opinions are noted for their clarity, their precision, and their scholarship. He's uniformly respected among his colleagues on the bench, lawyers familiar with his work, and the litigants whose causes he's judged. By June of this year, a majority of this court will be relatively new appointees. 4 of its members will have been appointed within the last 2 years. Judge Wackler has been a steadying and stabilizing influence throughout this period, and now he is in an excellent position to use his gifts of collegiality and judicial wisdom to lead this court to the stature and preeminence as a judicial body that it has enjoyed and deserves. He also has the advantage of understanding intimately the enormous administrative problems that will be faced by the next chief judge. For the last 7 years, he's reviewed the standards and administrative policies submitted by Chief Judge Cook and recommended by the Administrative Board of the judicial system. He understands the need for improvement in the administration of our court system. He has the knowledge, the willingness, and the proven administrative capacity to perform that task well. His administrative experience, incidentally, extends far beyond the judicial aspect of his life. Judge Wackler's entire adult life has been taken up in excellent service to others. He's a proven leader with the capacity to lead this court and system to the greatness that this state deserves. And Judge Fritz Alexander. He's been a justice of the Supreme Court since 1977 and an associate justice of the Appellate Division since 1982. His judicial distinguished career began in 1970 when he was elected to serve as a judge of the New York City Civil Court. I had the privilege of reappointing Judge Alexander as a member of the Commission on Judicial Conduct last year. Judge Alexander will bring to the Court of Appeals a solid record as a judge, a reputation for excellence, and a breadth of experience that results from his private practice of law as well as public service in non-judicial office. His written opinions are marked by clarity and cogency. He's been consistently evaluated at the top of all groups of candidates presented to me. No one was marked higher in all the various forms and all the different submissions that I received. We're very fortunate to have Judge Alexander available to serve us and the people of the state. I'm pleased that he will now be able to dedicate his considerable energies and talent and wisdom to the work of our highest court. I've appointed Chief Judge Wackler and Judge Alexander today, the first day of the court's calendar, in order to avoid disruption of the court's important work. I'll submit their names to the Senate for confirmation as soon as the Senate convenes. I so informed temporary President of the Senate, Warren Anderson, of that this morning in a phone conversation. I also wish to take this opportunity to thank two other great jurists who only 2 days ago terminated their service to this state. The first is the former Chief Judge of the Court of Appeals, Lawrence H. Cook, and the former Associate Judge, Hugh R. Jones. Chief Judge Cook has been a tireless, committed, innovative leader. As the first chief of the court appointed, he set an extremely high standard for Judge Wackler and all future chiefs to emulate. And Associate Judge Jones has sat on the bench since 1973. He's always been a jurist of inestimable character, competence, and commitment, despite an errant vote now and then on cases that I argued. On behalf of all the people of the state of New York, I thank these two great judges for their selfless service to our Empire State and wish them well in the long and fruitful career that I'm sure still lies ahead for both of them. In addition, I extend my personal thanks to them for their advice with respect to the 4 appointments to the court that I've been privileged to make so far. That concludes my statement, and now, if Judge Alexander doesn't mind, I'd like to have just a couple of words from him and then Chief Judge Wackler.
Governor Cuomo, as I indicated to you a bit earlier in our conversations, I am simply overwhelmed. I am delighted to have been selected to serve in this court. I look forward to the challenge that appointment presents, the opportunity to serve the state, the opportunity to bring to the work at the Court of Appeals those few talents I may have, that experience I may have gained in the years of my life that make me sensitive to the needs of justice, the needs of people. And I hope that as I move forward, I can discharge my duties with the level of excellence that this court requires. It will be my pleasure to work with Chief Judge Wackler. I said to him as we walked down the corridor this morning that I dare say had anyone told either of us in 1971 when we attended the State College of Trial Judges in Reno, Nevada, that we would be at this podium this morning, we both would have said to the person so predicting, they're crazy. But the ways of the world and the Lord are strange, and we are pleased. I am deeply pleased to be here and to be able to render service. I indicated at the time of my election to the civil court in 1971 that it would be my dedication of my life to the interests of justice and to pursue a judicial career that hopefully people can say, well done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Governor Cuomo, for your very kind words and for your even kinder deed in giving me this great opportunity to serve as Chief Judge of the New York State Court of Appeals, an honor which one could hardly aspire to. As Fritz said, when we were students and young trial judges together back 15 years ago, it would have seemed an incredible dream. To be a member of the New York State Court of Appeals in and of itself is an awe-inspiring experience. To be its chief judge, as I said before, is something which is almost numbing in contemplation. Since I've been on this court during the past 12 years, we have told the Grand Central Terminal that it could stand, and we've allowed the blue laws to fall. We've told an elderly man who was comatose that he had a right to die, and a young child that being sick, nevertheless, he had a right to live. We even had to tell Taiwan that whereas they could romp and play on Quemoy and Matsu, that Lake Placid was off limits to them. All of these matters coming into the courts, matters which were never before dreamed of, consumer class actions. The environmentalist has made the courtroom his battleground. The human rights activists, affirmative action, all of these matters, again, which were never conceived of by the mind of man or attorney, are now before the courts, presenting a challenge which is unequaled and one which I look forward to meeting with all the vigor of which I am possessed. Again, I want to thank Chief Judge Larry Cook for his wonderful work on the court as my predecessor, and Hugh Jones for the great companionship he gave to me when we first met as candidates together. For those of you who don't remember, there was a time when you ran for the Court of Appeals, and we were elected together back in 1972. It occurred to me this morning that I am the last member, as I stand before you, on the New York State Court of Appeals who serves by virtue of an election. All the others have been appointed. And considering the track record of this governor with respect to his two most recent appointments, and now Fritz Alexander as his third, I know we can look forward to a strong court which will once again bring the New York State Court of Appeals to its preeminence as the greatest common law court in the country. Thank you very much.
Do we have any questions? Limited to the Court of Appeals selection. None?
Can we ask questions?
You asked me, and the judge
I was just going to ask what plans Judge Walker has for administrative changes within the court.
Let me suggest that those questions wouldn't be appropriate. He's not yet confirmed. Neither judge is yet confirmed. They have a whole process to go through. I'm sorry that displeases any of the reporters, but it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense for them to be discussing that publicly before they get a chance to discuss it with the relevant Senate committees. Yeah.
What changes would you like Judge Wackler to make in the Court of Administration?
It wasn't appropriate for me to write out an agenda of administrative change in selecting a court. That would make me the chief judge to the extent that I was having my agenda interpolating to the court. That's not the way I chose to do it. The way I chose to do it was to limit myself to the constitutional criteria, which are very, very clear. And as I described in my statement, I studied their record. I didn't write up an agenda for their future to which I asked them to commit themselves. So I had no discussions with them with respect to what specific judgments they'd make in the future. I selected people who would make, in my opinion, good judgments.
How would you
Yeah,
characterize?
Jefferson.
Just to follow up, earlier during interviews with us, you had said that you planned to talk with Judge Cook about the idea of having the chief judge of the Court of Appeals also serving in that dual role of being in charge of the court administration. You weren't sure in your own mind whether or not that was a good idea because it may be too much for one person. Now with the chief judge of the Supreme Court saying pretty much the same thing, where are you on that now?
I spoke to Chief Judge Cook. I spoke to many members of the Court of Appeals and other judges on the subject. There is no question that it is a difficult job, and there is no question that being both the head of the adjudicative side of the court and the administrative side puts a double burden. I have said publicly to some of you, and I don't intend to embarrass Chief Judge Cook, former Chief Judge Cook, with this. I said it was almost incredible how hard he worked and had to work to do the job. The hours were enormous. I have said to some of the candidates, Chief Judge Wackler included, that I understand the enormous burdens administratively, and as governor I will do what I can to support the court in meeting those burdens, but we haven't been more discreet than that. I did discuss it with Chief Judge Cook, however. Adam?
Governor, based on your review of their records, how would you characterize the judicial philosophies of both candidates that you've nominated?
I wouldn't. And as a matter of fact, the statute makes clear that that's not one of the criteria.
Governor, you've been under some pressure from Democratic organizations in New York City to name a Democrat as chief judge. Do you expect any political backlash because your selection is a Republican?
I think no one ever gets faulted for choosing excellence.
Where does Chief Judge Wackler's, maybe I ask you too, where you stand on electronic recording equipment in the courtroom? Are you going to continue with allowing the proceedings to be recorded, or what are your estimates?
I would put the Judge Wackler, Chief Judge Wackler, and Judge Alexander can answer any questions they want for you at a later time. My own judgment as governor, having just appointed them, is I would like them to preserve their situation for the Senate confirmation hearings. They'll be free to make their judgments differently on another occasion, but for today I'd prefer they not answer those questions.
When do you think you'll be appointing a replacement for Judge?
The way it works, I don't remember the calendar, Mark, but first of all, there is no vacancy until Chief Judge Wackler is confirmed by the Senate. The Senate has, as I understand it, 30 days to do that. I'm sure that Senator Anderson will move that process expeditiously. Once confirmed, and that can't happen obviously until after January 9th, once confirmed there is a vacancy. Then the calendar starts again. I think I have until the beginning, they could put it off until about the beginning of April, but they could advance the schedule too. So we have to first get the confirmation, then you have to advertise again for new candidates and go through the process again.
So is this still considered a full court then, or is
It can function with the vacancy, and they bring people up for the 7th seat, if they choose to. I don't even know that you have to do that. It's a full court. It'll be able to function today with Chief Judge Wackler and Judge Alexander. And that's the reason I did it today, so that we can go from here to there, and they can open the court year with an effective court. And you can be effective even with 6 judges.
You seemed to make it clear earlier in our discussions about a new chief judge that you didn't approve of outright lobbying in favor of one candidate or another, especially by political forces. Was there political pressure brought to bear on you to name a Democrat as chief judge? And if so, did that help Judge Walker?
Yes, no, no. I don't, Mark, really, in fairness, I don't remember ever talking about lobbying and indicating I didn't want people to lobby. As a matter of fact, I thought I did just the opposite. I invited everybody who had a point of view to get in touch with me. I pushed very hard for the nominating group to be as open as possible to people. So,
What I mean is something further than lobbying, actual pressure tactics of a sort.
nobody attempted to pressure me. Certainly nobody did pressure me. I'd go beyond that and say nobody attempted to pressure me. I can't really tell that for sure because the attempt is in the mind of the pressurer, but I didn't feel it. Were there people who said that you should consider the fact that you are a Democrat? Yes. Were there many people who said that? Yes. Were they all Democrats? Yes. Is that understandable? Yes. Is it relevant? I don't think so. I don't think, and I've said this from the beginning, that the political registration or even the political history of the candidate is a relevant criterion in selecting a judge for the Court of Appeals. My first appointment was not a Democrat. Now, I must tell you, a lot of these factors can distort your judgment, and it can be done perversely. For example, you can bend yourself out of shape to appoint a Republican just to show that you're not appointing a Democrat, and that's wrong. What you should do is find the best available candidate that you can, and that's what I did. Okay? It would be wrong to say that if people put pressure on me, to use your word, to select someone who was already a sitting judge, that would have been good for the non-sitting judges. It didn't work that way. I listened to everybody. I read every letter. I reviewed every comment. I had some extended discussions with people on the telephone and personally, and I tried to weigh everything they told me as objectively as possible, but I had no perverse reaction to anything.
Did you talk to Judge Walker about the patronage situation and what his appointment would mean along those lines? Does it concern you?
No.
You don't think he will favor Republicans over Democrats?
I don't think it's relevant. And I don't even know that he gets involved in it. As I understand it, the chief judge works with the presiding justice of the appellate division, has an administrative person who is the day-to-day administrator. I think if you went to Dick Bartlett, this might make a good column. I don't know what Dick would say. I'll hope for the best. But if you went to Dick Bartlett, if you called him up and said, Judge or Dean or whatever you want to call him, what is this about patronage? He used to be a Republican. I guess he still is. Ask him, what about patronage? They say there are 400 jobs. See what he tells you. I would be surprised if he didn't tell you, what are you talking about? It doesn't work that way. And if you look at the kinds of jobs, I don't think it works that way. In any event, I'm not concerned about it. I believe that this court under Judge Walker will work the way it did under Chief Judge Cook, and that is that judgments will be made right or wrong on the merits, not because someone is registered a conservative or a liberal, a Democrat or a Republican. There is no evidence that that's the way it's been done. There is no evidence that that's the way it ought to be done, and I have every confidence that it won't be done that way. I'm not concerned about it.
I was going to ask the same question of Judge Cook. Do you think that there are, the chief judge does control patronage jobs, or that that's any factor in the administrative side of the job at all?
Chief, that's up to you, because you're now former chief.
There were no politics whatever in the operation of the administrative system of the courts during my time as chief administrative judge. There was no replacement of any person because of political considerations. We kept intact those who were in place when I became chief judge. It was considered a matter above political consideration. It should be done above political consideration.
Yeah, that's great. I prefer to say beyond political. But that's,
Their political philosophy.
I'm sorry?
If you won't describe how you view their political philosophy, would you describe for us or characterize their judicial philosophies as you sent through?
I don't want to get, we've been through this a whole lot of times, and I don't want to get too tedious about it. First of all, the political philosophy I wouldn't even know. because I'm not familiar with where Fritz Alexander, now judge of the Court of Appeals, Fritz Alexander, stands on political issues. I don't know. I'd have no way of knowing. I could probably find out if he's a registered Democrat or a registered Republican by looking it up, but that wouldn't tell me how he feels about supply side or conciliation as distinguished from strength in foreign policy, or the role of government in this society. I don't know anything about their political. I don't know about Judge Wackler's political philosophy. I could probably look up what he said 20 years ago when he ran for office. I don't know where he stands today on those issues, and I don't care. As to the philosophy that emanates from the opinions, and here I can get into a discussion with other lawyers, I don't think it's quite like the Supreme Court of the United States. I don't think there is quite the breadth of philosophical allowance in the Court of Appeals that there is in the Supreme Court of the United States. What I look for is not how they decide the cases and whether I agree with that decision, or whether they're conservative or liberal, whether they're strict constructionists or not. I look at each opinion that comes to me and I decide whether they were competent, whether they were thorough, whether they were logical, whether they are clear, because much of the law is not just deciding the case correctly, but announcing it clearly enough so that the residuals of it are clear to lawyers and so that they can have a system that's predictable. That means you not only have to make a sound judgment, you have to write it clearly so that other lawyers will instruct clients on the basis of that. And remember how this law works. You read Judge Jones's opinion as a lawyer, and you take a guess as to what will happen in the next case that's anything like that. In order to make that predictable and safe for my client, he has to write clearly. Judge Jones was particularly good at writing clearly. So is Chief Judge Wackler and Judge Alexander. So, no, the political and the legal philosophy were not relevant to me.
Governor, you've repeatedly criticized the system for selecting judges for the Court of Appeals. At the same time, you said
Yes.
that you've come up with 4 superb people
Yes.
for the court. Isn't the system working?
Both are true. I have criticized the system because I think it can be improved. I have also said it is a big improvement on what we used to have. And see, these truths can live in the same world. The system is better, but not as good as it could be. Why? Because I don't think there's enough clean accountability. Now, I don't believe Chief Judge Wackler would necessarily agree. I don't think Judge Alexander would necessarily agree. I know Judges Simons and Kay probably don't agree. They like the system, and I can understand that. From my point of view, you now have a system where the governor is not really accountable because he can take shelter in the fact that he was limited by the list. The people who gave you the list aren't really accountable because they're anonymous. And I think the elective system has, as part of its virtue, accountability. You elect people who are accountable. When people can duck, whether it's behind an authority like the MTA or a nominating commission that's anonymous, I think that's a weakness in the system. So I'd like us to move toward greater accountability. I did comment that I wish there were more diversity in the list than I do. That is not inconsistent with having excellence. So have I been given excellent choices? At least 4, and probably more, frankly, because there were other people on the list who were also excellent. I'm pleased at that. Can the system be improved? I believe it can. Is it better now than it was? Absolutely. All these things are true simultaneously.
Judge Wackler, do you in fact like the current system of selecting judges, or do you think it should be changed as well?
I like the current system of selecting judges. Standing here as I do at this time, I'd be inappropriate to say otherwise. I have been critical, and I was critical right from the start of the way the system was working, because if you recall, when the first list came out, I criticized that list for being one which had all male, all sitting judges, and all whites. And I thought that it seemed to me a state as diverse and as filled with talent as New York State, that a more comprehensive list could have been developed. As time went on, I think they've improved. I still don't think they're doing it as good as they should do it.
Do you support the governor's recommendations?
No.
What would you like to see done?
I think that the system is good. I think that perhaps it could work better. Perhaps the amount of members of the body could be expanded. Perhaps there could be different criteria established for the membership on that body, and perhaps they could enlarge the list somewhat. And their method of search, I think, should be described by the legislature as one which reaches out to every bar association, every civil rights activist group, every organization within the state, and there are many of them, to submit names, and then develop a very comprehensive screening process.
Okay? We need to get over to the court. Thank you very, very much. Okay. Put the chief in the middle here.
His Excellency, the Governor of the State of New York. These proceedings will now begin. All please be seated.
Your Excellency, Governor Cuomo, my colleagues, Chief Judge Cook, Judge Jones, distinguished members of the bench and bar, ladies and gentlemen, we gather here today in this beautiful courtroom on the auspicious occasion of the swearing-in ceremony of Judge Sal Wachtler as the 21st Chief Judge of this court, and Justice Fritz Alexander as the 76th Associate Judge of this court. Judge Wachtler, will you please stand at this time, and I'll administer the oath to you. If you'll place your left hand on the Bible, raise your right hand. Governor, would you stand alongside and repeat after me? I do solemnly swear
I do solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
that I will support the Constitution of the United States,
the Constitution of the State of New York,
the Constitution of the State of New York,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of
Chief Judge of the Court of Appeals
Chief Judge of the Court of Appeals
according to the best of my ability.
according to the best of my ability,
So help me God.
so help me God.
Congratulations and best wishes.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's my great honor and privilege as my first official act to swear in the newest Associate Judge of the New York State Court of Appeals, Fritz Alexander. Fritz, would you please stand forward? Raise your right hand and repeat. Repeat after me. I, Fritz Alexander,
I, Fritz Alexander,
do solemnly promise and swear
do solemnly promise and swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and the Constitution of the State of New York,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and that I will faithfully discharge
the obligations of my office
the obligations of my office
as Associate Judge of the New York State Court of Appeals
as Associate Judge of the New York State Court of Appeals
to the best of my ability,
to the best of my ability,
so help me God.
so help me God.
At this time, it is my great honor and privilege to recognize for some brief remarks the former Chief Judge of the New York State Court of Appeals, the Honorable Lawrence Cook.
Congratulate Chief Judge Wackler, Judge Alexander. I know that they will serve brilliantly. I am confident that Chief Judge Wackler will be a great Chief Judge. May I offer my wholehearted assistance in time you wish. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chief Judge Cook. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, His Excellency, the Governor of the State of New York, the Honorable Mario Cuomo.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chief Judge Wackler, former Chief Judge Cook, former Associate Judge Jones, judges of the Court of Appeals. No governor in the history of this state has had the kind of opportunity and challenge that I've been afforded with respect to shaping one of this state's most important institutions, its highest court, the Court of Appeals. I've already exercised that responsibility by appointing two judges, Judge Simons and Judge Kay, both of whom, it seems to me and to most people who understand these things, have performed superbly. Now I have the great privilege of having appointed two more members of the court. One of them a chief judge who will be called upon to lead this great court to new levels of adjudicative excellence while at the same time helping to administer the state's entire court system. Chief Judge Wackler and Associate Judge Alexander are uniquely well qualified in terms of character and temperament, professional aptitude, and experience to serve. They, together with the rest of this excellent court, can and I'm sure will bring to the Court of Appeals an even greater stature than it already enjoys, and it is today, as we all know, one of the most respected benches in the nation. I also wish to take this opportunity to thank two other great jurists who only a couple of days ago terminated their service to this state. The former Chief Judge of the Court of Appeals, Lawrence Cook, and Associate Judge Hugh Jones. Chief Judge Cook, I said earlier today, has been a tireless, committed, and innovative leader and has set a very, very high standard for Chief Judge Wackler and other chiefs in the future to emulate. And Associate Judge Jones, who has sat on this bench since 1973, has been a jurist of inestimable character, competence, and commitment. On behalf of all of the people of this great state, I thank these two great judges for their service, and I wish them well in what I have described as the long and fruitful career that I'm sure still lies ahead for both of them. In addition, I want to extend my personal thanks to them and to others for the help they've given me in making these 4 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Governor Cuomo. My colleagues, Chief Judge Cook, my former colleague, Hugh Jones, and my newest colleague, Fritz Alexander, whom I welcome to this honorable court. my dear friend Joseph Delacosa. We who deal every day with words know their limitation. They can be used to communicate ideas and to articulate the law, but when it comes to expressing emotion, they are woefully inadequate. When I was a law student in Virginia, we used to read about the New York State Court of Appeals and study the opinions of this court, and it was described to us by our professors as the beacon light of the common law. You can imagine the emotion I felt when I first became a member of this court and walked through those doors and stood before this bench. An emotion which, again, cannot be expressed in words. It is the same emotion that I felt every day during the 12 years which I entered this courtroom to serve on this honorable court. Today, the sense of awe which I felt then is still with me, but it is coupled today with the emotion of heartfelt gratitude. Gratitude to my wife Joan and my children who have tolerated me and shown me more patience and understanding than I deserve. To Dorothy, Mike, and Ivan, who try so hard to make me look good. Gratitude to my colleagues whose wisdom has given me support in the past and with whom I am confident this court can achieve new heights in the future. And more particularly and most particularly, I'm grateful to the governor, whose love of the law and whose love of this court makes this particular appointment even more meaningful. Grateful that he has given me this opportunity at a time when the work of the court becomes more important than ever before. As a people, we are fond of the notion that we are a nation of laws and not of men. We take great comfort in the thought that past generations have separated right from wrong and good from evil. But if we would but look at it carefully, we would find that it is each generation and the men and the women who serve in the courts, who interpret that law, who bring life to that law, which really sets it apart and which makes this democracy work. For example, I can't think of words less in need of annotation than those so proudly proclaimed by our founding fathers that all men are created equal. And yet we know that although our founding fathers in writing those words had a heart full of love and compassion for their fellow man, they never once intended to include women or members of the black race. It was through Plessy versus Ferguson and Brown versus the Board of Education and the 19th Amendment and the Civil Rights Movement, all of these things and the courts interpreting the law, which gave meaning and significance to those words, all men are created equal. And that's the history of our dynamic common law process. And to serve on this great common law court to help interpret and make that law is again one of the greatest privileges which can ever be bestowed on any person. And my heartfelt gratitude again to you, Governor, for giving me that opportunity. I thank all of you for being with us this afternoon, and I would like now to recognize for a few words, again, our newest colleague and my dear friend of many years, the Honorable Fritz Alexander.
Chief Judge Walker, Governor Cohen, my colleagues, Fritz Jones, Judge Walker so aptly described the inadequacy of words to express deep felt emotion that seize one on occasions such as this. I have said earlier today that I am, in a very real sense, overwhelmed by this event. I am grateful to the governor for having selected me to serve in this office. I pledge to him, to my colleagues, and to you, I will, with every fiber of my body, attempt to discharge the duties of this office in a manner that will make you proud of me, to continue the tradition of this court, which is the highest, and to permit those someday to say of my service, it was a job well done. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Judge. It is our custom and tradition in this court to recess at this time after induction so that the judges may step off the bench and greet each of you individually. And that, of course, includes the governor, who honors us this afternoon with his presence, or this morning with his presence. We will then resume the court session at 2 o'clock this afternoon. Until that time, we stand adjourned, and thank you all very much for your attendance.